and welcome to the 2022 Widthwise discussion on the state of the UK's large format digital print sector. At the start of this year, Image Reports conducted its 15th annual Widthwise survey of domestic PSPs in the wide format space. 201 companies responded to that, allowing us to produce the Widthwise report earlier in the year that provided a real grassroots snapshot of how the sector was performing and feeling. I've recently conducted a roundtable with a number of print chiefs for their latest take on the market. And today I'm very pleased to be speaking with two of the Widthwise sponsors for a supplier's perspective. I'm again going to base the discussion questions on the findings of the survey, so we'll just kick off now. Hello, Jane and James.
Hello.
Hi, Leslie.
Morning. If you can both just introduce yourself briefly in case people don't know who's who, and then we'll get into the questions. Jane, can you kick off, please?
Yeah, hi, I'm Jane Rickson. I work for HP. The area I focus on is large format production, as we call it, which mainly is the HP latex technology for the UK and Ireland.
James.
Hello, I'm James. I'm from AGFA. My role is really inkjet sales for the South, responsible for mid to high end UV equipment.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, firstly, I suppose the question's got to be, how would you describe the state of the wide format printing market in the UK over the past year, since sort of the middle of 2021? And what's more, how do you see sort of 2023 shaping up? James, should we start with you?
I think our names are very similar, so I'm not sure whether you said Jane or James.
What I'll do is I'm going to ask that question again so we can edit that out. And James, will start with you.
Okay.
What I'll do is I won't do it in the same order all the time because it gets a bit samey for everyone. So, okay. Firstly, how would you describe the state of the wide format printing market in the UK over the last year? And most importantly, how do you see the year ahead shaping up? Can I start with you, James?
Yeah, so I've come from the smaller side as well. So I've sold a lot of low end equipment, and I would actually say over the past year that slowed down massively. So the decisions for more your sort of 1 to 2 man bands is becoming a lot more challenging with things that are going on. At the top end, I would say that it's still very buoyant. I think people are looking at where they can save money. They're generally looking at where they can invest and improve the business. But yeah, it's two different markets, I would say, at the moment. Very much like the low end side, they're struggling. I think they're struggling to make the decisions.
Low end, James, are you talking, what do you mean by that?
So some more your 1.6 wide machinery. So yeah, as I said, the one to two man band companies that are sort of probably, I would say that they're not. I had a lot of pipeline around that sort of area where customers were just taking longer and longer in the decision process for a 1.6, which could range anywhere between sort of 10 and 30,000 pound, was much longer than probably what it is in the mid to high end. I think customers are more open to investing at the top end than they are at the lower end.
Okay, fine. Jane, what's your thinking?
I agree with James. I think looking backwards, I think the companies that had a diverse range of products that they were offering did better than the ones that were, some companies hadn't really diversified and they did the same thing that they've always done. And I think some of those really struggled, whatever size they were. From our perspective, from an HP perspective, I agree with James. The mid to high end market is more buoyant, in my opinion, than what we would call the low volume. I think people are sweating their assets. We've got the loans that are having to be paid back, and I think finance is getting tighter. But from our perspective, decoration was a really, really big market for us during the pandemic and since. And I think having the higher value applications, I think, are still buoyant. Whereas, and we've seen consolidation, you've seen consolidation in the industry. And in terms of the second-hand equipment, the things that you guys advertise, I've never seen as many second-hand devices on the market. But in general, I'd say the larger wide format companies are probably doing better than the commercial print companies.
Yeah. I mean, the 2022 Widthwise survey showed that the cost of supplies was a prime concern. What have the cost pressures been like on your own business? Have you raised prices? Do you expect, to see more pressures on supply chains and costs? What do you think is going to happen in the year ahead, Jane?
I think supply chain challenges are going to be ever present and it's not just print, it's everywhere. Anything that you do, and everybody's having challenges getting anything at the moment. So I think that's going to continue. We don't tend to discuss our pricing policy because, for competitive reasons, but in my area of the business, we haven't raised our prices in the last 2 years. We've kept them the same. And we've also tried to support our customers when they're going through some of these challenging times. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to take on as much of that as we can. And I think with HP, the bigger business being so diverse, that helps to allow us to absorb some of the pressures. So as of now, we haven't raised the prices of the equipment I'm responsible for. But, who knows what the future holds?
Yeah, exactly. James, what's the situation over at Agfa?
I think we've got a pretty good supply coming through. I think we've been able to get on top of that. In terms of pricing, similar as Jane, we probably wouldn't discuss too much, but in terms of consumables, we've only had one increase in the whole year. We've tried to keep it as low as possible so that we're not putting too much impact on the customer. So there's a lot of other areas in the business from other manufacturers where price increases have just kept on coming, which is obviously challenging for a customer because they don't, with the consumable costs consistently rising, it's difficult for them to pass that on to their customers.
Yeah. Are you finding that people are, buying more stock and holding it on site?
It probably leads more towards what we're trying to do in terms of one-drop shipments, so that they're keeping a healthy stock throughout the month. But there's still very much, I suppose, your small to mid-sized companies that are still ordering on a daily basis.
Yeah,
which is challenging because obviously you've got to try and keep stock levels to facilitate that customer.
Yeah, exactly. Your own end. I mean, I presume, Jane, you're in a similar situation as HP on stock.
Yeah, we're good because, again, being such a big company and we sell a lot of kind of fast-moving items for the home and for the workplace, our ordering systems are very good in terms of trying to work out the demand. We also work with customers, the bigger guys. We have consignment stock, so then they tally it up on a monthly basis. And I think we're also lucky in terms of the shelf life. So the shelf life of latex ink is 18 months. The white is shorter, but it does mean that the things aren't going out of date, which definitely helps as well.
Obviously, yeah, that's good. I mean, with organisations as well now looking at zero pledges in sustainability remaining sort of a critical issue or becoming more of a critical issue even, I suppose I need to ask, how are you greening up your own business and where do you think the sector as a whole needs to be making, I suppose, bigger or quicker advances? Jane, do you want to kick off?
I could have a whole day talking about this from a HP perspective. They had a social responsibility charter in 1956. So they were laughed off the stage. I mean, effectively, the company was formed by two hippies in Palo Alto. So it's all about social. It's not just about the greening up in terms of, a water-based ink or whatever. It's much, much, much bigger. I mean, HP's pledge is, they want to be the world's most sustainable and just technology company. And that's the kind of mission statement of the organization. It runs right through the company. And also we align our goals to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So it's not just about, as I said, a water-based ink. I think in the sector, it's kind of the elephant in the room, is print sustainable? But there's so many things that companies can do that are no cost to them. So we run a recycling program. We've run it since 1991, and it's across whether it's a large format printer or a small format printer, Planet Partners program. So it's free of charge to customers. And it's amazing how many of them don't use it. So if there's one thing to get across is if you've got a HP large format device, for goodness sake, register for the Planet Partners program.
What do you think they don't?
Maybe because it's free. I don't know about you, but sometimes if something's free, it doesn't maybe have a value. But we run an Amplify program for our channel partners, and we're also making sure that the channel partners are making sure the customers know that this thing exists. So I think because it's in our DNA, Sometimes we don't talk about it maybe as much as we should. And there's a lot of kind of issues around whether a company's greenwashing. So I think sometimes we don't put out what we're actually doing because we almost become almost kind of sanctimonious.
Yeah.
But, I'm a scuba diver, I'm a Marine Conservation Society, I do the beach cleans, it all fits with my own ethics. But the biggest thing is that the printing companies should actually use the programs that are already available to them free of charge, as well as, we do an eco solutions training. And we'll do audits for companies to help them be more sustainable. But so few of them pick it up because it's free.
Yeah, it's interesting. What do you find over at Agfa, James? How is the company greening up there? And, what do we need to do to make bigger advances, do you think?
In terms of what we're trying to do, we're trying to work more closely with our larger customers to obviously, again, come back to that 1 drop of ink per month to obviously reduce the carbon footprint as much as we possibly can. Obviously, we're always working on our ink technologies and trying to improve, moving forward in terms of, like, we have a very, very thin layer of ink that goes down and stuff like that. So we're very good in terms of the ink lasts longer, essentially. So it shouldn't be huge amounts of issue on things like carbon footprint and stuff like that. In terms of recycling programs, we're working a lot closer with material manufacturers to see where we can go forward with our ink and their material. But like what Jane said, there's a lot of recycle programs out there that you can use, and I don't think customers use it enough. And it's interesting, over the past probably 10 years, if you went back to sort of 2008, that sort of area where, for example, HP, they launched their latex technology, it was all green. It's the customer at the end, it's the actual end user. They're not willing to pay the higher price for a product.
Yeah.
I think that's the mindset that's got to change.
Yeah. I think there's a huge responsibility on the printing companies themselves to take some leadership in this. So one of our customers, I love it, they do a thing called Challenge Green. So basically they'll do 2 prices for a job. They'll do this kind of standard price, and then they'll do the price where they take everything back. They make sure it is recycled in a closed loop program, and the customer then makes the choice. And what's been interesting is when they started it, nobody was taking the green option. But now more and more companies are. And I think, we do things like if it's a HP branded media, we'll actually take it back ourselves as well. And because the ink is recyclable, then there's no impact there. But again, just getting people to use the programs that are already available is challenging. It's all out there.
Yeah. And I'm just going to move on to sort of a technological question, actually, which was when we polled everybody at the start of 2021, PSPs actually said that they thought the most major, sort of technological shifts in wide format were behind us. So do you envisage any really transformational technologies emerging in the next sort of 5 to 10 years? I mean, obviously you're not going to give away trade secrets, but do you think there are really big changes still to be made in the wide format inkjet space? Jane, do you want to kick off?
We can't talk about things that have not been announced yet. There will be an announcement shortly on the HP latex technology, which is quite exciting. Obviously, 14 years ago was when we launched the latex ink, which is, a substantial amount of time ago. We're on 4th generation now. I think one of the things that we should be looking at is managing print fleets. So I think in terms of maybe an advancement in the technology of the ink itself, I think everybody's continuing to develop ink. Legislation changes, which means we all have to redevelop our ink formulation. But there's an area I think that print companies need to invest in, and that's their own automation and knowing what's going on in their fleet. Again, because it's free, HP has a thing called PrintOS, which enables the printing company to know what's going on their machines anytime, day or night. You can have it on a tablet, on a mobile device. And again, a lot of people aren't using it. And that gives you, it shows how much ink you're using. And the new version of it will also enable you to plan your production. So you'll be able to see live what's on what machine, wherever it is in the world. Yeah. So I think that's an area that print companies should really be looking to invest in, is the actual data and technology within the device itself.
Yeah, totally understand. James, what's your thinking?
Obviously, we have stuff in the background that we're working on, but obviously I can't announce that here. But what I can say is that we obviously, with the acquisition of Inca Digital, we do have aqueous-based single path technology coming for packaging for the speed set. So that's something that's interesting for the future, especially for water-based applications as opposed to using other ink technologies that are out there. But in terms of it, yeah, I can't really say much else for what we've got coming.
I mean, I suppose this leads us into the sort of the next question that I had planned, actually, which was talking about, whether you see industry sort of 4.0 technologies sort of playing a wider role in wide format. I mean, it's, you assume that from a workflow, efficiency perspective and all that kind of thing that it will. But what's your thinking, James? Can you comment much on sort of the incorporation of more 4.0 technologies in this marketplace?
Not really.
I don't know. I mean, I can move on and ask.
Yeah, I think, I'll take some of it. Working across lots of different industries, HP provides technology to all sorts of different sectors. And I would say that the wide format industry is the slowest in adopting. We've got JDF capability built into all our printers. It's been there for tens of years. And most companies, when you go and talk to them about JDF, they don't even know what it is. So I think maybe a younger generation is coming through some of these print businesses, because a lot of the people we deal with are family-owned businesses. And I think sometimes when the younger generation comes through the business, that's when you start to see the change. So I think the technology is out there from all of us, but a lot of the actual print companies don't use it. Okay, interesting, yeah. And with a more hybrid sort of world of work, I suppose, where do you see sort of this sector diversifying now? I mean, the reason I'm asking the question, I get a lot of press materials talking about, obviously, opportunities in new growth vertical markets. But when we do the poll, things like, fabric printing, other than for soft signage, but, still things like interiors and floor graphics and things are still quite low down the pecking order when it comes to talking to PSPs about, where they see new business opportunity to any great extent, I mean, you've both got kit out there that will enable diversification into new markets. But is your own focus perhaps now towards more aiming those machines towards your own sort of different vertical marketplace, as opposed to trying to sell them into the professional graphics wide format market? Could I kick off with you, Jane? Is HP sort of trying to build a different customer base itself, if you like, for this wide format technology? We're always looking for ways that the print companies that we work with can go into different markets, higher value applications. I think you talked about interiors. It's quite an interesting area in the UK is interiors. Wallpaper is a very fashionable thing right now in the UK. You tend to find wallpaper is in the northern countries, not in the southern countries. They paint everything, maybe because it brings more warmth into a room. I'm not quite sure. But what you tend to find is there's some big players in that market, which are the traditional wallpaper companies, analog players who are going digital. And I think for a professional wallpaper, it's not just about putting it through a print device. It's about the finishing of it. It's a fashion industry. So we've been particularly successful in that market over the last, 7 or 8 years. And I think it's for a standard kind of PSP, it's not easy business for them. And unfortunately, some of them just go for the low-hanging fruit. We are always looking for different markets to help people diversify in. We run webinars, we run seminars, we run all sorts of things trying to introduce new markets. But you tend to find it's the same guys who do it all the time. It's the entrepreneurial print businesses that go and take on the new markets. And it's just finding enough of them that can work with us to develop these markets.
James, at Agfa, I presume they too, like everybody else, you want to remain competitive. So I presume you two are looking to put your large format inkjet kit into new verticals.
I would say so, yeah. I mean, absolutely. I mean, interiors is absolutely massive. In terms of wall covering, it's something I've got quite a lot of knowledge of from the company that I worked at previously. In terms of it, it's not just wall coverings with interiors. There's so much else that goes with it. So obviously you've got digitally printed blinds, that kind of market, but anything interiors, tablecloths, flooring, there's multitudes of opportunity within customers that our customers are already selling to, but probably need to diversify more. Now, what I would say over the last 2 years, since COVID obviously kicked in, and obviously the print industry for that first couple of months probably stalled a little bit until things like flooring came back in, like the social distancing. A lot of people spent that time wisely diversifying their businesses, which is probably why a lot of them kept on, probably survived that period of time, because they did diversify so much. Especially when you look at things just like canvas, for example, that's come back to the market, where over a period of time, it probably it was just an internet-based thing, but a lot of people are bringing that back into interior. In terms of what else do we have, I mean, especially with something like the, we work quite, with our Vinci, we're doing a lot more with dye sublimation again, because we go back earlier and we talk about greener-based products, obviously using fabrics as opposed to using vinyl and, rigid substrates and stuff like that, are quite heavily got PVC in them. I think that is still the future, and I still don't think in the UK we've grasped it as well as they have in the rest of Europe.
Yeah, I mean, just generally to finish off, I mean, how optimistic do you feel about sort of the large format market in the UK? Do you think we're back to where we were pre-COVID? Do you think it's a growing market? Maybe in comparison to the rest of Europe, as an example. What you're thinking on that, James? What's your gut feeling on what you're hearing?
I think if you talk to customers, we are certainly on our way back. Would I say that we are fully back? No, not at all, because there's still a lot of places out there that are not spending as much as they used to prior to COVID. But what I would say that a lot of those bits are, again, people are diversified. They are being, what they may well have printed prior to COVID is being replaced with something else. So what do I see for the future is that, everyone's got to advertise. And I think whatever period we're going to come through in the next 12 to 18 months, depending on what happens, I still think that, people have got to move with the times and keep on diversifying, but we're still going to get back that traditional work. And I think it will still completely grow, because in a time of that we could be entering, people need to advertise more. Yeah. It's always been consistent throughout that.
Jane, what do you think in terms of, generally the state of the market in the UK compared to elsewhere?
I mean, I talk to obviously colleagues in Europe, and I talk to a lot of PSPs in the UK. Currently, they're busy. The people that we're talking to are busy. And that is, to me, that's a really good thing. I think it's a shorter term market right now. So the contracts that they might have had for, say, 6 months previously, they're probably on a month-to-month basis now. So there's no continuity, I'd say. I think everybody that I've spoken to is very confident coming up to Christmas. And then it's what happens in 2023 is probably more of a concern. Similarly to James, I'd say the market isn't fully back. But I still think it's a more buoyant market than some others. I think wide format, I think some of the small format companies are definitely looking to embrace wide format, because I think there is still more of a market there than there sometimes is with the smaller format. Again, with the different technologies, we've seen massive growth in things like labels and packaging. So the bespoke side of things, I think the personalization, having something that is just for you, I think is the way forward. So it might not be the volume, but I think it's about the value.
So just to wrap up very quickly, do you think that, investment levels were proven to be relatively flat really when we did the survey at the start of 22. Do you think you can expect to see UK investment levels pick up from 23 onwards? What do you think, Jane? Is that likely to happen? Is that something?
Yeah, I think it always helps when you've got something new. So, we do have a new product being launched, and that always gets more interest. But we also find it gives more interest in the other products, that people come back and have another look at the portfolio we've got when we announce something new. So it's always exciting when we announce something new. And I think what we're trying to do with HP is, like I said earlier, is give better value rather than necessarily volume. So take people into new areas, white ink, the versatility of all the thing for us is about trying to put as many different materials through one device as possible. So make that device as versatile as possible. So, whether you want, again, we were talking about trying to move away from things like PVC, but it's still there. But, be able to produce on different fabrics, different natural cloths and what have you on one particular device, and make that device as efficient as possible for the customer. But in terms of where do I see the investment going forward? I'm actually relatively optimistic. I think, like everybody, with the turmoil in government and everything at the moment in the UK, I don't think anybody can know what's going to happen in the future. But if we're basing on what people are doing right now, there is optimism. And like I said, the printing companies are busy.
Yeah. James, what do you think about investment levels going forward?
I think it's positive. It's a challenge, obviously, when you come from the start of the year or even during COVID. But obviously, since they put out the super tax deductions that were available, obviously they're coming to an end at the end of March next year. Is that going to see a decline in investment? I don't think so, because moving forward after that, obviously things like corporation tax is going to rise. So with that rising, will they want to spend more? So they're giving less to the government, and I really do believe that moving forward, depending on what happens next year, which is it's an unknown. It depends on how long this government lasts. So I think moving forward, I see it as a really positive for the next couple of years. I can't see it. We're obviously going to have some sort of downturn, I would say, next year at some point, but I wouldn't say that until the back end of the year if you look at what people are saying. But it depends on how we come through. It depends on what the government come up with and how they move forward. But in times of like a recession, in that sense, there are lots of opportunity, huge amounts of opportunity. Diversify. The more you diversify, the better. And, coming back to things like using fabrics and stuff like that, you're reducing lots of things like deliveries and stuff like that. You can package things up in a much smaller, much smaller parcels as opposed to sending out big rigid sheets and stuff like that. So there's lots of different things moving forward that I think is really positive. And I think people are still looking at their business and how can they make things? How can they be more efficient? How can they reduce energy costs? These are all things that are key to a company at the moment with what's happened already. But yeah, I think it's positive.
Yeah, I think what we saw during the pandemic was actually more cooperation between print companies. I tend to find in the UK, people are very protective of their business and they often don't want to share knowledge with people who they see as their competitors. What we saw during COVID was there was like a band of people got together, and instead of a job that was going to be printed in Kent and shipped to Scotland, the Kent company worked with a company in Scotland to print it locally. And I think that is something that's going to continue. We've also seen European-based companies bringing print into the UK. So whilst Brexit has been challenging on a lot of levels, what I have definitely seen is that European companies that previously printed on the continent and shipped into the UK are setting up in the UK to make it more local. So I think that's a positive.
Yeah, I mean, we had a roundtable recently with, as I say, we're at the start of this with some print chiefs, and everything you've said, totally dovetails with what they've been saying. So yeah, fingers crossed, optimism remains high, and and people's faith is fulfilled, if you like, going forward. We've come to the end of this discussion. No doubt we'll talk again, lots more, hopefully. But I really appreciate you taking the time out to have the chat, and I don't know whether the people listening here have all seen the Widthwise report yet, but it's on the website, and we'll be doing the 2023 poll again in the new year and repeating the discussion this time next year. So thank you very, very much for your time. I appreciate it. Thank you.